The morning sun glinted off the steel and glass of Reed Technologies' headquarters, casting prismatic patterns across the polished marble floors. Julian Reed stood at his office window, 32 floors above the bustling city, surveying the urban landscape like a modern monarch. At 35, he had everything society deemed valuable wealth accumulated through his software innovations, recognition in both business and social circles, and the kind of striking good looks that made heads turn. "At the quarterly reports are ready for your review," came a soft voice from the doorway. Julian turned to see Olivia Winters, clipboard pressed to her chest, hair pulled back in a practical bun that did her no favors. She wore shapeless clothes in muted colors, oversized glasses perched on her nose. Seemingly determined to blend into the background, finally he said with a dismissive glance, "Just leave them on my desk. I'll get to them when I can." Olivia nodded, placed the neatly organized folder exactly where it belonged, and retreated without another word. As she left, Julian heard laughter from the doorway. His executive assistant, Derek, leaned against the frame. "I swear that woman is part ghost," Derek joked. "Has she ever spoken more than 10 words at once?" Julian's lips curled into a smirk. "I doubt she'd have much interesting to say anyway. Efficient, though. I'll give her that." "Are we still on for drinks with the Vantage Media people tonight?" Bianca asked if you're bringing someone, Derek mentioned, referring to Julian's ex-girlfriend. "A model who still moved in the same social circles? Tell her I'm bringing the new Tesla instead," Julian replied with a wink. Later that afternoon, Julian passed the finance department on his way to a meeting. Through the glass walls, he noticed Olivia hunched over her computer, completely absorbed. In her work, while others chatted around her, something perhaps annoyance at her perpetual seriousness made him stop. "Winters," he called as he entered the space. The room immediately quieted. "These projections from this morning, they're missing the Singapore expansion data." Olivia looked up, her expression composed despite the public critique. "The Singapore data is in Appendix C, Mr. Reed, page 40-3. Double quotes," Julian faltered momentarily. He hadn't actually read that far. "Well, it should be highlighted in the executive summary. I shouldn't have to hunt for critical information." A few colleagues exchanged glances. Everyone knew Julian rarely read beyond the summaries. "You're right," Olivia replied without defensiveness. "I'll revise the format for next quarter's report." Something about her calm acceptance irritated Julian more than if she'd argued. He nodded curtly and left, but not before overhearing someone whisper, "Classic Reed always has to find something wrong." The comment stung more than it should have. Outside in the hallway, Julian caught his reflection in the glass. Handsome, powerful, feared rather than respected. For just a moment, he wondered when that had become enough. Asterisk, the annual read. Technology's gala transformed the city's premier hotel ballroom into a showcase of success and ambition. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over executives in bespoke suits and partners in designer gowns. Julian moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and offering the right words to the right people. "Quite the turnout this year," remarked Thomas Blackwood, Julian's oldest friend and company co-founder. "The Davies Group is here, perfect timing with the merger talks." Julian nodded, scanning the room. "Where's Derek?" He was supposed to brief. "Me on their new CFO. Bar. Last I saw him," Thomas replied, then added with a smirk, "You might want to rescue Olivia Winters first. Patterson's been talking her ear off about tax codes for 20 minutes. Julian followed Thomas's gaze to a corner, where Olivia stood nodding politely at the elderly board member. She wore a simple navy dress, modest compared to the other women's attire, but at least it wasn't the usual gray or beige. Her hair remained in its customary bun, though a few strands had escaped to frame her face. "She probably understands more about tax law than anyone here," Julian said with a shrug. "That's her natural habitat." As the evening progressed, Julian found himself surprisingly distracted. Twice he lost track of conversations when his eyes drifted to Olivia, who moved quietly through the event, speaking briefly with colleagues, but mostly observing from the periphery. After his third champagne, Julian excused himself from a group of investors and headed toward the restrooms. The hallway leading there was quieter, the music and chatter fading with each step. He rounded the corner just as the women's restroom door opened. Julian stopped short. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Olivia stood before the large mirror in the outer lounge area, her glasses removed and resting on the marble counter. She had let her hair down, rich chestnut waves cascading past her shoulders. In the warm lighting, her features appeared softer, more defined. She was applying a subtle rose lipstick with such focused precision that she hadn't noticed him. She looked beautiful, not in the manufactured way he was accustomed to, but with a natural elegance that seemed almost fragile in its authenticity. When she finished, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, her shoulders squaring as if preparing for battle. The vulnerability in that small gesture struck Julian unexpectedly. He retreated quickly before she could see him, feeling oddly like an intruder. Back in the ballroom, he accepted another drink and tried to resume his networking, but found himself searching for her in the crowd. When he spotted her again, she had her glasses back on. Hair partially resecured, professional mask firmly in place. Yet now, Julian saw what lay beneath the careful construction of her workplace persona, the deliberate downplaying of her appearance. "You're staring," Thomas commented, appearing at his side. "At what?" Julian asked, too quickly. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. I've never seen that look on your face before." "What look?" "Confusion," Thomas replied with a knowing smile. "It suits you, makes you seem almost human." Julian scoffed, but as the night continued, he couldn't shake the image of Olivia's unguarded moment or the uncomfortable question forming in his mind. How much else had he failed to see? The Monday following the gala brought torrential rain that matched Julian's unsettled mood. He arrived earlier than usual, nodding absently to the security guard as he made his way to his office. The building was quiet, most employees not due. For another hour, to his surprise, a light was already on in the finance department. Through the glass walls, he could see Olivia at her desk, focused on her computer screen. Her hair was damped from the rain, twisted back into its usual style, but Julian now saw it differently, a practical choice rather than a lack of effort. Before he could reconsider, he found himself walking toward her office. "You're here early," he said, causing her to start slightly. "Mr. Reed," she acknowledged, straightening in her chair. "Yes, I wanted to finalize the Davies proposal before the meeting." Julian leaned against the doorframe. "The meeting isn't until Thursday. I prefer to leave time for revisions," she replied, her tone professional but guarded. "Do you ever take a break winters?" he asked, genuinely curious. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "Of course I garden, quite obsessively actually." The small personal detail felt like a victory. "Flowers? Vegetables, mostly. There's something satisfying about growing something useful." Julian found himself smiling, practical even in your hobbies. "Was there something you needed, Mr. Reed?" she asked, clearly uncomfortable with the personal turn. "Actually, yes. I was hoping you could walk me through the Singapore projections in person this time." Her eyebrows rose slightly above her glasses. "Now, if you're not too busy creating food security in your spare time," he replied with a light teasing tone he'd never used with her before. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "I'll bring the complete file to your office in 15 minutes. Nice. When she arrived, Julian had cleared his usually cluttered conference table. For the next hour, she methodically explained the financial models she'd developed, her quiet voice growing more animated when discussing the intricate details of her work. Julian found himself genuinely impressed, not just by her thoroughness, but by her strategic insights that went well beyond number crunching. "You've obviously put a lot of thought into this," he said when she finished. "Why didn't you speak up in the planning meetings?" Olivia carefully reorganized her papers. "I submit my recommendations in writing. It's not the same as advocating for them." She met his eyes directly for perhaps the first time. "With all due respect, Mr. Reed, my ideas tend to be..." In those settings, the implication was clear, and Julian felt a flush of discomfort. Had he been that dismissive? "I'd like you to attend the Davies meeting on Thursday," he said suddenly, Present this section yourself. Alarm flashed across her face. I don't think that's necessary. Asterisk I do, Julian insisted. This is your work. You should get credit for it. As she left his office, Julian noticed Derek watching with undisguised curiosity. And do you have private meetings with the human calculator? Derek asked. Don't call her that, Julian replied, the sharpness in his tone surprising them both. Asterisk, asterisk. Over the next few days, Julian found himself noticing Olivia in new ways: her quiet efficiency, her small kindnesses to junior staff, the subtle humor that occasionally surfaced in her emails. He made excuses to visit the finance department, each interaction revealing another facet of the woman he'd overlooked for 3 years. At Thursday's meeting, Olivia presented her analysis flawlessly, though Julian could see the slight tremor in her hands. When the Davies executives praised her innovative approach, Julian felt an unexpected pride. Impressive colleague you've been hiding, Reed, remarked Davies' CEO afterward. Yes, Julian agreed, watching Olivia accept congratulations from the team. She certainly is. Rain pelted against the windows of Reed Technologies as the autumn storm intensified. Most employees had departed early at Julian's suggestion, but lights still burned in the executive suite where the leadership team celebrated securing the Davies contract. To Olivia, Thomas raised his glass, whose presentation sealed the deal. Glasses clinked amid congratulations. Olivia accepted the praise with a modest smile, though Julian noticed she seemed uncomfortable as the center of attention. Impromptu gathering dispersed. Julian found himself alone with Olivia as they waited for the elevator. You disappeared quickly after your moment of glory, he commented. She adjusted her glasses, not particularly fond of spotlights. You deserve recognition for your work, Julian insisted as they stepped into the elevator. I should have noticed it sooner. The elevator descended in silence until Olivia spoke. May I ask you something, Mr. Reed? Julian, he corrected. And yes, why the sudden interest in my work and me? Her direct question was delivered without accusation, but with a wariness that made Julian wince. The elevator reached the lobby before he could answer. Outside, the storm had escalated to near biblical proportions. Did you drive today? Julian asked, watching sheets of rain batter the entrance. I take the subway, Olivia replied, eyeing the deluge with resignation. Julian made a quick decision. My driver's waiting. Let me take you home. She hesitated, clearly weighing her options against the weather. That's not necessary. Consider it. Thanks for saving the Davies deal, he pressed. She still looked uncertain. He added, Please, Olivia. Her name on his lips seemed to surprise them both. After a moment, she nodded. In the quiet sanctuary of the town car, Julian finally answered her question. I saw you, he admitted. At the gala, outside the restroom. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by something like disappointment. Ah, so it was just no, he interrupted, guessing her conclusion. It wasn't about how you looked. It was ... He struggled to articulate it. It was seeing you when you didn't think anyone was watching. The person you are when you're not in the office. The car slowed as they entered a modest neighborhood far from Julian's usual haunts. You asked why I suddenly became interested, he continued. The truth is, I realized I'd been seeing what I expected to see, not what was actually there. And I wondered what else I might have missed. Olivia studied him, skepticism evident. People don't change their perceptions that easily. No, Julian. Agreed. But sometimes they can be shocked into paying attention. The car stopped before a small brick townhouse with window boxes still vibrant with autumn blooms despite the weather. Your garden? Julian asked, nodding toward the colorful display. A small part of it, she confirmed. Oh. The useful things are in the back. Something in her tone made him ask, Why is being useful so important to you? Olivia's hand paused on the door handle. When I was 16, my father lost his job. Cancer diagnosis. No insurance. Her voice remained steady, factual. I learned quickly that in crisis, practical skills matter more than anything else. Beauty is a luxury. The personal revelation hung between them, unexpected and heavy with, meaning, my father died believing he was a failure because he couldn't provide anymore, Julian found himself saying. I built Reed Technologies trying to prove I wasn't him. Appearances became everything. The confession surprised him as much as her. Olivia's expression softened. "Thank you for the ride," she said, then hesitated. "Would you like to see the rest of the garden? It's not much, but ... double quotes, the invitation felt monumental. I'd like that." An umbrella, they dashed through rain to a small backyard where raised beds housed a remarkable variety of vegetables protected by ingenious plastic coverings. "You built all this?" Julian asked, genuinely impressed. "It's what I do," Olivia replied. With a small smile, "I'd build things that last." In her sanctuary, surrounded by the evidence of her careful cultivation, Julian began to understand the woman he had overlooked for so long and the emptiness of the world he had constructed for himself. Asterisk. Spring arrived at Reed Technologies with subtle changes that few initially noticed. The glass office walls remained, but the doors stayed open more often. Executive meetings now included voices from all departments. No. And if anyone thought it strange that the company's founder now regularly ate lunch in the staff cafeteria instead of his private dining room, they kept such observations to themselves. On this particular April morning, Julian stood in the rooftop space that had once hosted exclusive client events. Now it was transformed. Raised garden beds lined the perimeter, young seedlings reaching toward the sun. At the center, Olivia knelt in jeans and a faded t-shirt, demonstrating proper planting techniques to a group of enthusiastic employees. "The community garden was your best idea yet," Thomas said, joining Julian at the railing. "Though I'm still not convinced about the 4-day work week." Julian smiled. "Activity is up 17% since we implemented it. Turns out people work better when they have time for their lives." Speaking of lives, Thomas nodded toward Olivia, who was laughing at something a colleague said. Hers seems to have bloomed quite spectacularly. Indeed, the change in Olivia over the past months had been remarkable. She still wore her practical clothes and sensible shoes, but she moved with a new confidence. Ideas once confined to written reports now featured prominently in company strategy. The woman who had hidden in plain sight now led the company's most innovative sustainability initiatives. Her quiet authority, earning respect throughout the organization. "It was always extraordinary," Julian replied. "I just needed better vision." Later. That afternoon, Julian found Olivia alone on the rooftop, checking the irrigation system. "The tomatoes look promising," he commented, handing her the soil gauge she'd been reaching for. "Another month," she confirmed. "The daycare children are already planning their harvest pizza party." Julian marveled at how easily they moved together. Now, the awkwardness of their earlier interactions replaced by comfortable familiarity. Their relationship had evolved gradually, professional respect deepening into friendship. And then, almost imperceptibly, into something more profound. "I have a proposal for you," Julian said, leaning against a planter. "The sustainability director position. It would mean overseeing all the environmental initiatives, including the new vertical farm project." Olivia stood, brushing soil from her hands. "Wouldn't that be a step away from finance?" "It would be a step toward the future. Your future, specifically. You've built something remarkable here, Olivia. People follow your lead because they trust your vision." She considered this, looking out over the garden and the city beyond. 3 years ago, I would have said no immediately. Stayed where I felt safe. And now?" Julian asked, trying to keep his tone casual despite his racing heart. Olivia turned. To him, sunlight catching in her hair. She no longer wore it severely pulled back, though it was still practical, much like the woman herself. "Now I understand that growth requires risk," she said. "In gardens and in life." Julian took her soil-smudged hand in his. "Speaking of risk," he began, suddenly nervous in a way board meetings never made him. "I was hoping you might be available for dinner tonight. Not as colleagues, not as friends." A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. "I was wondering when you'd get around to asking properly. Is that a yes?" "It's a finally," she replied with the directness he'd come to cherish. As they stood together amid the growing things, Julian reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. How a chance encounter had cracked the carefully constructed facade he'd built around himself. How seeing Olivia truly seeing her had ultimately allowed him to be seen in return. You know, he said thoughtfully, for a man who built his fortune, on innovation, I was remarkably blind to what was right in front of me. Olivia squeezed his hand. Some transformations take time, she said. The most important ones always do. Below them, the company Julian had built continued its daily rhythm, changed in ways both visible and invisible. Above, seeds they had planted together reached steadily toward the light, each one a small promise of what patient cultivation could yield. In the garden they had created together, surrounded by new growth, Julian Reed finally understood, true worth was never about appearance at all, but about what lies beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look more deeply. Asterisk.